Hello and welcome to the Stronghold Digital Mining Daily Update. Today is Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. Okay, several things to go over briefly. It is kind of late, but I want to touch on several topics that I do think are relevant and important. And the very first one, it's really in response, at least somewhat in response to a question asked on YouTube, right? And the question is, hey, what would hash prices have to look like? And I'm paraphrasing the question here. Hey, let's say at 10-cent hash prices, or say 9-cent hash prices, or even 12-cent hash prices, what difference will hash price make insofar as Stronghold Digital Mining's ability to repay its principal portion of debt, right? And that principal portion of debt that I'm referring to, and that I believe the questioner is kind of referencing, is the Whitehawk finance piece of our debt picture, so to speak, right? It's the really big, sort of like if you look at a pie chart, the Whitehawk finance portion of the debt constitutes the overwhelming majority of that pie chart. And as of September 30th, 2023, which would have been the very end of Q3 2023, that debt stood at $54,239,946. So let's just call it, $54.2 million. Okay. So there are two mechanisms through which the principal is going to be repaid. One of those mechanisms has already sort of like gone into effect, and it went into effect as of June of 2023. And that is essentially a scenario in which 50% of the average monthly cash balance in excess of $7.5 million gets paid to Whitehawk. It's an automatic sweep function that sweeps the money to Whitehawk. And I wanted to read that wording quite precisely instead of attempting to paraphrase it, because I do think that it's important to be somewhat precise when we talk about how we are going to be repaying this debt. So as of June of 2023, okay, so that would have been a little over roughly 6 months ago at this point, 50% of 50% of the average monthly cash balance in excess of 7.5 million would have been swept to Whitehawk. Now, there hasn't really been that much swept to Whitehawk as of yet, if I'm not mistaken, and you can double check this detail, but I believe in the Q3 2023 Form 10Q, right, our quarterly filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission, I believe the amount cited as having been paid to Whitehawk pursuant to that sweep function might have been somewhere in the vicinity of about $250,000. Okay. Now that we are in Q1 2024 and we've begun to see, as we began to see, I should really point out, starting kind of like in November of last year, like November 2023, December 2023, we've seen instances, right, where the amount of revenue that the company's generating, has been somewhat meaningful, right? Compared to what it's been for the overwhelming majority of 2023. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see once we look at the Q4 2023 figures to see, hey, how much might have gotten swept, right, on a monthly basis to Whitehawk during the months of October, November, and December of last year. Certainly for January, the month that we're in right now, I suspect that there's going to be a meaningful contribution, right, towards the amount that's being repaid to Whitehawk pursuant to this sweep function. Apologies if that sounds a bit technical and I'm getting into the weeds, but again, it's something that exists, and it's one of the two mechanisms whereby this debt is getting repaid. Now, the second, somewhat more maybe traditional mechanism is going to take effect beginning in July of this year, July of 2024. that is when mandatory amortization payments begin. And that's going to exist as a debt repayment mechanism in addition to that sweep function that I just finished attempting to describe. Apologies again if it got a little bit technical. But beginning in July of 2024, the specific mandatory amortization payment that we're going to have to make, I believe it's on the last Friday of every month, double check me on that, is $1,615,261.41. That's a very precise number. So beginning in July of this year, about $1.6 million is going to be repaid to Whitehawk every single month at the end of the month, and that's going to go towards principal reduction. We need to keep in mind, right, that while the sweep is there, right, anything, generally speaking, now I'm paraphrasing, right, the average cash balance above $7.5 million, that's going to get swept to Whitehawk. The mandatory amortization payment of about $1.6 million, that's going to get paid directly to Whitehawk. Now, we have to remember the interest payments. Now, these interest payments will come down as the principal comes down, right? But as of right now, we're looking at interest payments, which we've been paying. This isn't something that, sort of like went away. There were some modifications to the mechanism through which the interest could be paid. But we've been paying interest on this debt, right? And the coupon is essentially 10% plus I believe the secured overnight funding rate, SOFR. And if I'm not mistaken, SOFR is at about 5.15%. You add all that, add that together, it's like 15%. So you take, and we could do the computation right now. I do not like doing math in real time. In fact, let me use my my desktop computer's calculator. I don't like doing mathematics in real time in my head and attempting to sort of convey that number. It never really works out. Before I clear what's on the calculator, I wanted to just briefly interject that based on the S3 filing, which was released after the market closed today, when you add up the Class A common shares, when you add up the Class V for Victory common shares, and you add in the shares that are being registered as part of the S3, add it all together, you've got 18,871,668 shares, right, in total of Stronghold Digital Mining, fully diluted shares. Let's sort of phrase it that way. Is that an absolutely precise number? Maybe not, but it's pretty darn close to reality. And so the dashboard at designer.com, the market cap computation now utilizes roughly 18.9 million shares as the number, which is multiplied by, the stock price to arrive at a market cap for shares of Stronghold Digital Mining. Okay, a lot of numbers. Now let's switch back to the computation we were just about to do, which is to figure out, hey, so what would a monthly interest payment look like for Stronghold Digital Mining? So let's go ahead and take the 54, let's just round it out. Let's just say $54,200,000, okay? And let's multiply that by approximately, say, let's call it 15%. That's 8.13 million, right, for an entire year. Let's divide that by 12. So we arrive at monthly interest payments of, say, roughly $677,500. So when we add that to the mandatory amortization payment of, say, roughly $1.6 million, we basically get roughly $3 million per month that Stronghold Digital Mining will be paying to Whitehawk beginning in July of 2024, absent there being any further modifications to the credit agreement. So of that roughly $3 million, we already know about 1.6 million will be principal payments. And what did we say? Roughly almost 700,000 more or less will constitute interest payments. In addition to that, bear in mind, right, that what is it again? 50% of the average monthly cash balance in excess of $7.5 million gets swept to Whitehawk. So, let me be clear, because I think I may have slightly misspoken before. It's not that 100% of anything above $7.5 million gets swept to Whitehawk. It's half of everything, right, on average, above $7.5 million gets swept to Whitehawk to help reduce the amount of principal load. Okay, let's take a deep breath. That's a lot of numbers. Now, the original question was, hey, well, based on hash prices, what kind of potential revenue can we expect to see coming in for Stronghold? And can we potentially see like an accelerated debt repayment based on really good hash prices? Let me dig into that computation in a separate video. Rest assured, though, that I think Stronghold Digital Mining feels very confident that they can make the mandatory amortization payment. We've been making the interest payments. So the cash sweep, that's kind of like a bonus. Think of that as like bonus payments that be made to Whitehawk to help reduce the amount of debt outstanding. Okay, so at last check, the price of Bitcoin was just over $46,000 per coin. I'd be remiss if I didn't, state the obvious, right? I think you probably saw this. The United States Securities and Exchange Commission, their account on X was evidently compromised, and a tweet went out, or an X message went out indicating that a spot Bitcoin ETF had been approved. Evidently, that was sent in like an error. Tomorrow is the day, right? January 10th, that I think we're all expecting for there to be an actual announcement, hopefully indicating that a spot Bitcoin ETF has been approved. But until then, we still don't really know. Shares of Stronghold Digital Mining closed at $7.36. I think we're at a point here where, from an operational standpoint, hash prices are just at around 9 cents. That's incredibly helpful, incredibly useful. So that's really, really good. Hey, will we see a pop in the price of Bitcoin if and when a spot Bitcoin ETF, either one or more, are approved? I think there's evidence to suggest that might happen, because when that erroneous message went out earlier today, Bitcoin shot up to close to 48,000 a coin. So I think there's something to be said for the price of Bitcoin enjoying something of a kick. Let's phrase it that way, based on some positive news on the spot Bitcoin ETF front. Okay, final thing I want to mention. I will link to this in the description of this video, okay, of this broadcast. So to make a long story short, we've created a community on X, and it's called Strongholdlers. It's something that you can click on, check out. If you've got an X account, you can certainly join this community. This was made at the suggestion of a friend of the channel, and and other friends, all chipped in to kind of help make this a reality. And so that community now exists, and hopefully it will be a place where we can kind of consolidate information. It might be easier to find things that have been said about the company. It's not going to reduce the amount of public posting that I do, because I think it's also important to speak to the widest audience possible. But for those of us who would like to have something a little bit more of a community going, now we've got that on the X platform. So once again, check the link in the description to this broadcast, and you can check it out if you happen to have an account on X. Okay, it's past 10 o'clock. I'm kind of on the tired side. I hope you had an excellent day. Tomorrow is a new day, so let's be positive, let's be great, and we'll see each other again tomorrow.